There's a plan sitting on the PGA Tour's desk right now that will decide which players get to keep their careers. And it has nothing to do with how they play this week. 50. That's the number of spots guaranteed into the sport's biggest events under the new system. Everyone else on tour, dozens of players who are making a living right now, is fighting for whatever's left. So here's the question worth sitting with before we go any further. If the tour splits itself in two, which half are you on, and would you even know it yet? The man behind this isn't a golfer. Brian Rolapp spent 22 years at the NFL before the PGA Tour handed him the keys, first as CEO in 2025, then as its next commissioner, a role he officially steps into on January 1st, 2027. He built his career on media rights and business deals, not major championships, and now he's the one redrawing the entire competitive structure of professional golf. What he's proposing isn't a scheduling tweak, it's a two-tier system. One track for the top of the sport, a second track for everyone trying to climb into it, set to begin in 2028. Supporters are calling it overdue reform. Critics are calling it something else entirely, a caste system with a scoreboard. And somewhere in between those two views are the players it actually affects, the ones whose entire livelihood depends on which side of the line they land on. So, do you think a two-tier tour makes golf better, or does it just protect the players who are already on top? Drop your take in the comments right now and hit subscribe, because we're about to get into exactly how this plan works, who it protects, and who it puts at risk. So let's start with who it protects, because that part of the plan is already locked in. Track 1 is called the Championship Series, somewhere between 21 and 26 events a year, all signature-style tournaments. Fields capped around 120 players with a cut. It folds in the four majors: the Players' Championship, the season-ending events, and the Ryder or President's Cup. This is the golf you already watch every week. The biggest purses, the biggest names, the biggest television windows. Track 2 is the Challenger Series, the feeder tour underneath it. The pathway up is built around performance. Win twice in the Challenger Series in a single season, and you're promoted straight into the top tier. No waiting list, no committee vote, just results. On paper, that sounds clean. Two tiers, one clear ladder between them, merit deciding who climbs. Rolap himself has framed it as one tour, not two. Just two compelling series of events feeding into each other. But here's what that framing leaves out, because a ladder only matters if you know how many rungs you're standing on. And right now, nobody outside the tour's boardroom actually knows where that line gets drawn. The real fight isn't about the top. It's about who gets left off it. Right now, under the current system, the top 100 players in the FedEx Cup standings keep their PGA Tour status. The top 50 get into signature events, the closest thing the current tour has to this new top tier. Below that, the pathway comes from three directions: the top 20 finishers on the Korn Ferry Tour, the top 10 from the DP World Tour, and the top 5 out of Q School. Under the new structure, that math doesn't just shift, it tightens. A field of 120 sounds generous until you remember it has to hold the four major champions, the Ryder Cup team, the sponsor exemptions, and every top 50 regular, all before a single Challenger Series graduate even gets a seat at the table. Rolap has said eligibility for both the 2028 season and the bridge year before it will be finalized by year's end, which means, as of right now, the exact cutoff line doesn't exist yet. 50 guaranteed spots, 100 players clinging to status, and dozens of careers sitting in the gap between those two numbers, waiting on a decision nobody's made. For the players already living inside that top 50, this plan is close to a dream scenario. Rolap has said in plain terms that his goal is a season that feels like 20 players' championships. Bigger fields at the top mean bigger purses, more world ranking points on the line every single week, and a schedule where the best players in the world are guaranteed to face each other far more often than they do now. No more skipping smaller events to manage a schedule. The smaller events largely won't exist inside their tier at all. It's a version of the tour built around its biggest stars, packaged closer to how the NFL sells its marquee matchups. Which tracks, given who's building it, every signature event becomes appointment viewing. Every week matters. For the top 50, the ceiling on what they can earn and how visible they are goes up substantially. But that same design that elevates 50 careers is, by definition, built on top of everyone underneath them. For 50 players, this is a gift. For everyone else, it's a countdown. Think about who sits between 51st and 100th in the current FedEx Cup standings. These aren't scrubs. These are full-time tour professionals, guys with wins, with sponsor deals, with families and mortgages built around a PGA Tour paycheck. Under the current system, they're still inside the tour's top tier. Under the new one, unless the finalized eligibility rules are generous, a significant number of them fall straight into the Challenger Series. That's not a demotion in name only. It's fewer marquee events, smaller purses, less TV time, and, critically, sponsors who sign those players expecting championship series exposure, not a second-tier feeder schedule. And remember, this line hasn't been drawn yet. Rolap himself has said no final decisions have been made, which means every player currently sitting in that 50 to 100 range is playing out this entire season not knowing which tour they'll actually belong to in 2 years. So the picture's clear now, right? It's not, because the players aren't just watching the numbers. Some of them are pushing back. So if you were sitting at 62nd in the world right now, would you be rooting for this plan or fighting it? Let me know in the comments, and if you're finding this breakdown useful, hit subscribe, because the next section is where this gets genuinely tense. Pushing back is putting it mildly. Rory McIlroy, one of the most influential voices in the sport, has already described the lower tier in blunt terms, calling it a group of glorified Corn Ferry events. That's not a passing complaint. That's one of the tour's biggest stars telling the world out loud that he sees the second tier as a demotion dressed up in new branding. And McIlroy isn't some outsider sniping from a podcast. He's had direct conversations with Rolap himself, an hour-long call by his own account, trying to understand where this is actually heading. His read on Rolap afterward wasn't hostile exactly, but it wasn't comfortable either. He described someone who'd gotten into this job and realized how difficult it is to turn this big ship around, navigating what he called a lot of cooks in the kitchen and a lot of opinions. That's the real tension here. It's not simply players versus a villain. It's players versus an institution moving faster than anyone can fully agree on. A tour reshaping itself in real time, with the people most affected still trying to figure out if they should trust the process. Now strip the drama away for 1 second. Because when Rolap himself addressed the criticism directly, he didn't back away from it. He pushed back on the idea that this splits the tour into winners and losers at all. One tour, two compelling series, he said, insisting both tiers belong to the same PGA Tour, not a demoted version of it. And when asked about players keeping their status based on past accomplishments versus pure results, his answer was direct. There's an effort to recognize career accomplishment, but at the end of the day, it will be the meritocracy that wins out. That's the reframe. Not two classes of golfer, one ladder with results as the only currency that moves you up or down it. Win twice in the Challenger Series, you're in the top tier immediately. No favors, no politics, no legacy exemptions holding a spot open indefinitely. It's a genuinely compelling pitch if you're building a sport around fairness. It's a much harder pitch if you're one of the players currently living comfortably in a system that's about to stop grandfathering you in. So, back to that question from the very start. Which half of the tour are you actually on? For a growing number of players, the answer that used to be obvious isn't anymore. And this isn't staying contained to one tour. Behind the scenes, there's already talk of lowering the qualifying age for PGA Tour champions, the senior circuit, to let more recent stars in sooner. One commentator called the idea crazy, pointing out that a player like Adam Scott, still competing in majors right now, could suddenly find himself teeing it up against legends a full generation older, years before he'd ever expected to. The pathways are shifting too. Q School spots, Corn Ferry Tour graduates, DP World Tour access, every one of those feeder systems has to be renegotiated around where the new tiers actually sit. A pathway that used to lead straight onto the PGA Tour might now lead into the Challenger Series instead, with an entirely new set of hurdles standing between a player and the tour he thought he'd already earned his way onto. None of this is finalized. All of it is coming. 3 pathways, 2 tiers, 1 deadline the end of this year, when the players currently in limbo finally find out which future they're actually playing for. So go back to where we started. 50 guaranteed spots, 100 players clinging to status under the current system, and somewhere in that gap, dozens of real careers, not headlines, not hypotheticals, waiting on a line that still hasn't been drawn. This is what McIlroy meant when he talked about a big ship being difficult to turn around. It's not one decision. It's every player's mortgage, every sponsor's contract, every family that built a life around a tour card. All of it moving at once in a direction nobody outside a boardroom has fully mapped yet. Rolap isn't wrong that the sport needs a meritocracy, and the players pushing back aren't wrong that meritocracy is a much easier word to say than to live under when you're the one on the wrong side of 50th place. Both things are true at the same time. That's exactly why this story was never going to end quietly, because right now, somewhere on that bubble, there's a player who has no idea this is the season that decides everything. PGA Tour in 2028, 2 series, 1 schedule built entirely around the top 50, engineered to feel like 20 players' championships in a row. Bigger fields, bigger purses, every week must watch. The other built around proving yourself all over again, no matter what you've already accomplished to get this far. For the players already inside that top tier, none of this chaos even touches them. Their world just gets bigger, richer, more visible. But for everyone hovering around that 50th, 60th, 80th spot right now, this is the season that quietly decides the next chapter of their career, whether they realize it or not. And that's what makes this different from every other tour shakeup we've covered. This isn't a rule tweak or a purse increase. It's a complete redraw of who belongs where, decided not by one bad round or one controversial ruling, but by a boardroom timeline that ends before this year does. Rolap built his career turning media rights into billion-dollar businesses at the NFL. Now he's applying that same instinct to golf, and whether you think that's exactly what the sport needed or exactly what it should have protected against, one thing is certain. Nobody currently playing on the PGA Tour gets to sit this one out. So here's where I leave it with you. Is a 2-tier system with real promotion and relegation the fairest thing that's ever happened to professional golf? Or is it the moment the tour finally stopped protecting the players who built it? Drop your verdict in the comments below, and while you're there, tell me where you're watching from. Country, city, doesn't matter. I read every single one, and I'm genuinely curious how far this story is reaching. If breakdowns like this, the ones nobody else in golf media is willing to actually dig into, are what you come here for, hit subscribe now, because by the time eligibility rules are finalized later this year, dozens of careers are going to get an answer, and we'll be here to break down exactly what it means.